Well, it is Friday morning, and you know what that means. It's another edition of the Indian Nation Station pregame show. I am your host, AJ Ganger. With me, as always, the one and only Coach Brian Gillespie, who is riding high as Rocky Top right now.
Indeed.
Brian, it has been, today is going to be the regular season finale, which is really just hard to believe that we're already at week 10, and it's been a 2-week period with some downs, but some ups as well. We lost to Tip City, which we'll get into a little bit of that game. In week number 8 last week, we went on the road again and faced Butler with a big win. Again, we'll go over that. Tell everybody what you've been missing.
I'll tell you what, it's very interesting. That Tip game was they had it. They played way better than they did against Xenia.
Yeah.
They were locked in, man. They looked like they were shot out of a cannon. I mean, there were some guys that have played better in that game than I've seen them play their entire careers. And it just, they caught they had some hamstring or some, they just seized up at the end, a couple players, and we lost them for a couple plays or a series. And we fumbled it once, a key fumble there in the second half, or that game ends and a pick will win. I mean, they controlled it most of the game. Fourth quarter, we get a bad call by the referee, in my opinion, on the punt.
Yes.
And, get blocked into it. The guy looks up, sees the punter on the ground, decides he's going to throw a flag, even though I don't know that he even saw the play happen.
No.
So they're one or two plays there from beating Tip, who's third in the state in Division III now. And I think that bodes well, even though not a win, I think that bodes well for the playoffs. At least we're sharp, locked in. If they play like that, they can compete at the very least in the first round. Second round's going to be a tough one this year, but you got a chance if you compete like that in the second round, and then you never know what happens after that.
Yeah, you really don't. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of our scores from around the NVL from last week. Tip City with the victory 63-27 over Fairborn. Stebbins with the touchdown victory 34-27 over Sydney. Troy 61, Greenville 13. Xenia beat West Carrollton 64-20 on Thursday night. And obviously Pick was shutting out Butler 24-0. And since it's been 2 weeks, Brian, let's go ahead and let's break down both Tip City and Butler's game. But first, we're going to take a look at some of the team stats for the Tip game. As you were saying, Piqua was controlling that game for most of it. Fourth quarter came around, Tip City controlled that line of scrimmage.
Yeah, the stats are very similar. You have 333 yards for Tip, 303 for Piqua. First downs were very similar number. Passing attempts, Tip probably threw it more than any other team we've seen, throwing it 29 times. Piqua threw it 21 times. I mean, everything's pretty stacked even. The Piqua had 2 key turnovers.
Yeah. And
turnovers get you beat. If you don't turn the ball over, you're going in for the go-ahead, or the extending of your lead there late in the third quarter. You can't have that, especially in a tight game like that. Momentum switches. Tip was up against the wall. Piqua driving. Isn't that always happens in sports? Something changes the tide, and that penalty on the punt, which was questionable, but also the decision to even bother rushing it, trying to get in there, maybe just let them kick it. I always hold my breath when I'm watching a football game where it's real close and you can't afford to jump off sides on the special teams. You can't afford to rough the punter. I always wonder why people even bother trying to get in there when if they fake it, you're better off being at the line anyway.
Yeah.
And you don't want to hit the punter. If you're wide open and they're not good on special teams, is one thing. But I think in that scenario, it really cost them dearly, and that changed the momentum. And then it's like a downhill, it just all flowed downhill from there. And it was rough for Piqua to get back in the fourth quarter. You suddenly have guys getting nicked, are seized up, their legs are seized up. Then it just was unable to get back. But then last week, they circle wagons, come back, control the game against Butler. And Butler probably has one of the stiffest defenses in the league. They don't have a lot of offense.
No.
But at the very least, you controlled that game. You never gave Butler much hope. You got 13 tackles for a loss in one game. I mean, they might as well have been paying rent to stay in their backfield. Butler probably sent him a Venmo request after the game for the money. I mean, that's the way you have to take care of teams that you're better than. And clearly Pick is better than Butler, and they didn't give him a chance to even sniff the end zone.
No, they didn't, and they really did control that game, but the offense was struggling throughout because of Butler's good defense. This is a Butler team that played a 9-0 Xenia team down to the wire, too.
Yeah.
They've played tough games against Tip and Troy, all these other teams. Butler's playing tough football. They're just not getting the offensive production, just like you said.
Yeah, defensively, Butler's is probably the best defensive team in the league, to be honest. I mean, if you look at the numbers, they're probably right near the top in almost every category. So they don't make it easy on you. It was a little harder than it usually is for Pickwa's offense. But, that's good to see a good defense and see how you react. Got a field goal in there, got 3 touchdowns, still scored 24 points against a good defense. So that's a win. You walk away from there ready to go, finish your regular season this week.
Yeah, Brady Ewell was, again, another very efficient day passing. He was 14 of 20 for 144 yards with a touchdown and a pick. Kai Warner got the ball 25 times for 139 yards and a touchdown. Schmeezing added another 68 yards and a touchdown, but he also had 12 total tackles on defense. Drayshawn with the 4 catches. Frazier with 3 catches for 53. Devin Finley on defense was a man possessed with 14 tackles and a sack. Jackson Tremblay, obviously 1 of 2 on field goals. And he's been struggling a little bit this year from years past as well, not making some of those field goals.
Yeah, he's a heck of a punter. He's been doing always does great on the kickoffs. I think field goals, he's been a little in between. He gets a good one, and then he's a little off. We're going to need that production. He's going to need to come up big, probably in a close game in the playoffs. So hopefully you can get that thing rolling.
And one of the last stats I want to take a look at from this Butler game, Pickett with 342 total yards of offense and Butler with 96. 342 yards against a good defense like that, and then your defense can hold them for less than 100. That's a good day at the office.
Yeah, I mean, even though it probably wasn't the prettiest game, but you don't always have to be as pretty as perfect. They were good enough. Obviously better than most teams could do against that team. So.
I agree. Let's go ahead and move on from the Butler game as we'll take this time to thank all of our sponsors for the 22-23 season. Kathy Henney, Little Caesars, Teach Tech Productions, Buffalo Wings and Rings, Dick Lumpkins, This and That Candy on Main, Harmony Systems, Craix Corporation, Edison State Community College, Dr. Littlejohn, Morris Comfort Systems, Atlanta Sportswear, and our new one, 36 Skate Club. Well, we're going to move in now to the Division II Region 8 rankings. These are the top 16. These teams would be in the playoffs if the season were to end today, which it is. Winton Woods is jumped Xenia for the number 1 spot. Xenia is number 2. Edgewood is 3. Kings is 4. They lost to Winton Woods the last time we were on the air, 28-23. So that was a close game, but Winton Woods came out on top. Withrow has jumped Pickwa now, and they are number 5. Pickwa sits at 6th, followed by Troy at 7, Northwest at 8, Anderson at 9, Ross at 10, Stebbins at 11, Loveland at 12, Sydney at 13, Little Miami 14, Lima Senior 15, and LaSalle sitting at number 16. So right now, we would more than likely have a rematch with Stebbins.
Which is hard to believe that you'd be hosting Stebbins 2 weeks in a row. But it looks very likely. I mean, you're talking about the likelihood of moving to 5 is not very good. Withrow's got a pretty winnable game last game. Even if they didn't win that game, Pick was not going to get a ton of points from Stebbins. They might bump Withrow for the 5 if Withrow loses, but that's about as high as you're going to get. Outside of a stunning loss, I'm not even sure even if Pickwa lost this week, they would move down from 6.
No, I don't think so.
So you're looking at 5 or 6 seed. 6 seed gets you most likely a rematch with Stebbins. Other teams in the mix, Loveland, Sydney, and Ross. But that would require Sydney to pull off an upset of Xenia, which that's not happening in most worlds.
No.
So you're looking at more than likely, it's falling together. Stebbins is going to be there. chance Loveland wins their last one and bumps Stebbins back, and then we get Loveland.
Yeah, I would think, though, a pick will win tonight would more than likely, I think, if the points are, even if it doesn't have to do with points, the state should look at that and go, why would we have those two teams play back-to-back in the same place? Let's go ahead and either move Stebbins up or down, depending on the loss, and we'll put Ross at 11 or Loveland at 11 so we can get a different game that week.
Unfortunately, it is what it is these days.
You know,
they don't have any freedom to do that. It's the point system dictates that, and really there's only a handful, a couple spots that are going to change. I put together the bracket here. Boy, oh boy, I look at that first. Winton Woods plays all season to be number 1 seed.
Yeah.
Hey, congratulations. You get to play LaSalle in the first round.
Who is 2-7, by the way, going into week 10.
And they play one of the hardest schedules in the country. So you look at that 2-7 and go, oh, they're not very good. Because they really aren't a great LaSalle team compared to years past. But, man, that is not a reward for being the number 1 seed. Because, I mean, LaSalle's still a solid team, way better than other teams down there by 16.
Yeah.
So if LaSalle loses, Winton Woods is not going to be happy. And they're probably going to lose this week.
I think that also there was one game last year that a 16 beat a 1. One out of all the regions in the state. 1 16 team beat a 1. That could be number 2 if it happens.
Oh my gosh, you talk about crazy.
You're going to go into the defending state champion's house first round as a 16 seed and knock them off?
Well, it's going to be a lot better than any other 1-16 game.
I agree.
Probably, so.
I agree.
But I don't know that LaSalle has enough this year. And what's hilarious about it is LaSalle would probably, if they lost or if they won or if they lose, and our friends from Dayton City League Belmont win, they might bump a LaSalle team that would beat them by 40 probably.
Yes,
if
easily.
they played head-to-head. So that's hard to believe, but that's a possibility.
Yeah.
But, of course, that requires that requires LaSalle not to win and then have a little faith down there in the Belmont Bison, which is a limited chance of that happening. So we'll see. But that, to me, looks like the only movement down there. Obviously, Lima Senior, Little Miami, they're going to be in. Sydney's going to be in. There's not a lot of – there might be a slight movement of numbers, but it looks like people are pretty secure where they're at.
Yeah.
So it looks like Pickle will be the 6. They'll play Stebbins. Edgewood will be the 3, probably play Little Miami, the 14. Winner of that game will play each other. So Pickwa may have to rematch with Edgewood, but this time go to their place.
Yes.
And they're tough this year.
And last year was a neutral site game. It was not a home game for either team as well.
So that's a large hill to climb in round 2, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Maybe Edgewood will have nightmares from that 70-yard punt from Jackson Trombley that shift all the momentum in that game, which you can watch only on the Indian Nation Station YouTube channel.
Check it out. It's got lots of views. Let's get those numbers up.
Well, let's move on from our rankings into this week's MVL matchups to close out the season. As 8-1, Tip City travels to Greenville to take on the 2-7 Green Wave. 6-3, Troy goes to at Butler, who is 3-6. Xenia 9-0 at Sydney 4-5. West Carrollton may get a win this week. They may not, as 1-8 Fairborn hosts 0-9 West Carrollton, and then our game Pickwa versus Stebbins. Pickwa 7-2, Stebbins 5-4. Any games jumping out at you right now as surprises besides our Pickwa game?
Only this really the only other game that has any kind of competitive spirit to probably will be Troy at Butler.
Yeah.
Butler could potentially stay in that game with their defense as they did against Pickwa. Can they score enough points against Troy to get over that hump? I doubt it. But still, it's a reasonable chance. The other ones, you've got 2 teams in Fairborn and West Carrollton are both eliminated from postseason.
Yes.
Hard to believe those teams put up a great game. I mean, it's going to be pretty a snooze fest there. I mean, if 1-8 versus 0-9, that's rough. Tip City will handle Greenville. You're looking at Xenia, Sydney. Sydney's 4-5, but Sydney isn't having a great season, so it's going to be a rough go against even hosting Xenia, I don't think that's going to be much of a game.
No, I think Xenia will be the one to run all over Sydney, probably worse than we did that
potentially.
night. Well, let's go ahead and talk about our game here tonight as Piqua is trying to finish the regular season 8-2, secure that first round home game, which I think they've done already, with the possibility of a rematch against Stebbins next week on the table. A win might change that, but again, like Brian said, it might not change all that much. Since the MVL was reformed in 2019, Piqua has not lost to Stebbins. They've beaten him 27-10, 27-0, and 49-6 last year to secure their back-to-back MVL championships. Brian, what are we looking at from this Stebbins team coming in tonight?
Well, they are coming off two wins in their last 3 games, so that's been kind of a positive note for them. They came out really, they don't have that impressive of a record. I mean, you're looking at 5-4. One of the wins really didn't count for the rankings.
Yes.
So they're really at 4-4 for the year. They're coming off a 34-27 win over Sydney, which solid win. That's their best win though. They've really kind of taken advantage of a weaker schedule to get some of their wins. They don't have a lot of offense. I watched the Butler Stebbins game on Thursday Night Lights a few weeks ago, and boy, it was a titanic struggle
between defenses.
And it was also a titanic struggle between 2 pretty bad offenses.
Yeah.
So they're not gonna put up a lot of points in this game. So I think Piqua is going to be in the driver's seat there.
So we're probably going to be looking at a similar game to last week in terms of great defense, not a very good offense.
Solid defense. I don't know that they're Butler on defense.
Right.
They're pretty good defensively, but I don't think they'll be able to hold Piqua to 24. I think it's more of a 34-7 type game. I just think Piqua is way better than them, and that's why I don't really want to see this game 2 weeks in a row.
No.
If we can avoid it. But that might happen, so we'll have to see. But I would not expect a whole lot of, even last year when Stebbins was having one of their best years ever, we went there and beat them 49-6.
Yeah, we mollywopped him last year.
Mollywop. This guy's throwing it back with that one. But 49-6, and that's at Stebbins beat Taze Valley in the first round. That was 4-13 matchup. You remember that?
Yes.
So that was one of
good
their best
Stebbins
years, and we beat the daylights out of them. So this is not the team as good as that team. So I don't like it to be that close of a game.
I agree with you. What are some keys to the game here for Piqua so we can get out of here with a W?
I think you just got to be who you are. Keep running that ball. Kai Warner seems to get better and better every week. He's confident. He had a nice game against Tip until the fumble. Last week he put up some good numbers. They were feeding him the ball a lot. The more you can be successful in the running game, which I don't know that they were real successful early in the year.
No.
The more you can get better at the running game, that sets up the pass, which is already good. So that's going to add more and more points. And I think that's the key to the game, is getting that running game underway. Turn over Stebbins a couple times. There you go.
It does seem like our offense was kind of backwards this year, because more times than not, you start the year out with a great running game, not a very good passing game. Mm-hmm. We started out just throwing the ball all over everybody, and then when that slowed down, that's when our running game started picking up.
Well, I think with Kai emerging as the starting running back and being more of a consistent guy back there, I think that's really emerged. But also you have Schmeezing if you need to give it to him. I mean, he had 11 carries last week for 68 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah.
So that's nothing to sneeze about. But if you can avoid giving Sam the ball a lot, only because he's playing linebacker and there's a lot of stress on him on that level, on that side of the field, you kind of want to stick to Kai and just, he got 5.6 yards per carry last week with 139 yards. I mean, if you get that out of him each week, that's a good base for, okay, now we can pass with some freedom.
And one of the things I've noticed too is when Kai fumbles, because he does have an issue with fumbling the ball, it's Sam Schmeezing's show. Mm-hmm. Sam goes in for a couple series after Kai fumbles the ball.
Well, I know football coaches. I watch a lot of football, and every time I see the guy fumble, usually you don't see him a lot anymore.
Nope.
It happened in the Tennessee game the other day. The guy put the ball or 2 weeks ago, put the ball on the ground, and he was like a ghost.
Yep.
You never saw him. He didn't touch the ball the rest of the game. Football coaches are very, very sensitive to that turnover. They do not have patience for guys who fumble. So Kai's got to hold on to that ball, and if he does, he's going to have nice game against Stebbins.
And another thing, I saw that in the Michigan game a couple weeks ago when C.J. Stokes fumbled the ball. Blake Corum went back in, and you haven't seen C.J. Stokes since that fumble. So
he's on a milk carton somewhere.
He's somewhere missing, so maybe we'll see him soon. All right, Brian, well, thank you again for being here on the Pregame Show, as this will conclude this week's episode of the Pregame Show. Just a reminder to everyone that all regular season games that we cover are a delayed broadcast and are able to be watched following the conclusion of the game. You can listen to the game tonight live on WPTW as well. Tonight's game will be available on Channel 5 starting at 1 p.m. Saturday afternoon. It'll actually be up there throughout Saturday morning, Saturday night, so just be on the lookout if you want to watch it on TV as opposed to YouTube. Also, keep an eye on our social media pages. As the playoffs get around, last year we were able to live stream our games for real. So we may be able to live stream our playoff games again. Just keep your eyes on our Facebook page, also the Piqua Athletics Twitter page for all of that information. Stay tuned for the 2022 season finale between Piqua and Stebbins with Tom Michaels and the one and only Brian Gillespie on the call. For Brian, I'm your host, AJ Ganger, saying good night, go Piqua, and beat Stebbins.